Welcome to another edition of On My Couch. So my name's Damien O'Malley and joined by my co-host Sue, our special guest Lauren Carnegie. So I'll introduce Lauren. Actually, I'll ask Lauren to introduce herself in a minute. On My Couch, Sue and I started this, and really the intent is actually to have good conversations with really smart people about particular topics that we're interested in, that we want to learn more about, that we're potentially working in already. And also we want to learn some more and potentially bring it into our professional life or maybe into our personal life as well. So firstly, introductions. My name's Damien, as I mentioned, founder of OMC Group, and what we do fundamentally is help people work better together. So leadership development, culture, people strategy, that's sort of what we do, but the why is actually to help people work better together. So Sue, maybe if you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Damien. And for those that are watching, just want to be really clear, you haven't had a big night. My screen is playing up today, and so it's a little bit blurry. So if you're adjusting your whatever's on your laptops or PCs, it's okay. Don't just leave it. So as Damien said, my name's Sue. I work with Damien on and off in various capacities, having had a large corporate career for over 30 years. And now I do bits and pieces, I suppose, of what you say, working with really different people and different groups across various topics or projects.
Terrific, Sue, and I'll just do a quick highlight, Lauren, and then ask you to sort of add to it as well. But as I mentioned, Lauren Carnegie, Community Leadership Director at the Committee for Geelong, one of a number of hats that you wear. So I'll let you talk about those hats. In previous On My Couches, one of the themes that comes through a lot is we tend to talk about leadership just because we're interested in it, we're fascinated by it, and it's something that we're striving to do ourselves. And so today we're going to sort of explore that a little bit more with Lauren, but maybe with a bit more of a specific slant. And we're going to focus on developing community-orientated leaders. So that's sort of the headline theme that we're talking about today. And so some of the questions we might look to explore with your help, Lauren, is, what does it take to lead with and for the community in a way that's meaningful and real, and how do you develop community orientated leaders, and sort of why should we develop community orientated leaders? So Lauren, I know you've had a number of roles in your career focusing on leadership development and org design, and how about you introduce yourself and maybe give us a quick overview of your career.
All right, thanks Damien and Sue, and I'm going to start with a fun fact.
Yes.
So if you rearrange the letters of my name, Lauren, it spells learn, which I only realized a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh, how fitting. But learning really is at the heart of absolutely everything that I do. I think it also drives how I show up in the world. And so I'm a really naturally curious person, and that love of learning has sort of led me to sort of study and work in a range of different areas. When I went to university, I studied all the ologies you could think of. So psychology, sociology, and anthropology. They helped me to understand human behavior and culture. I then went on to study geography, which really helped me to understand the connection between people and place. And then when I realized that, perhaps I need to find a job in something meaningful, I then went on and studied management, marketing, and organizational leadership. So it really got me understanding how organizations work, how to design and develop them intentionally, and then really how to lead people and teams, particularly during times of change. And so, as I said, it's a bit of a fruit salad, and I've always found myself at the intersections of those disciplines.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that I'm wearing 3 hats. The main hat that I'm wearing today is as the Community Leadership Director with the Committee for Geelong. And in this role, I really have the privilege of meeting lots of really amazing community leaders and aspiring community leaders. And I run 2 main programs in partnership with my amazing colleagues at the Committee for Geelong. So the first one is the Leaders for Geelong program, and that's a 12-month leadership program. And the second one is called the Activate Leadership Program. It's a shorter program designed for emerging leaders, people new to leadership, or if they've never had any formal leadership training before. The second hat I wear is I'm the founder of my business called Learn and Lead. that's been running for the past few years. And as part of that, I have the opportunity to continue my work with leaders and leadership teams in organisations. And it's really about helping them learn from the moments that they find themselves in, and to exercise leadership in systems that sort of feel ambiguous, complex, confusing, and how do they need to show up in those systems to lead change, and get and do good work. And probably the third hat I'm wearing is the one that I really love. It's one that brings me enormous pride and joy, and I'm the vice president of a community organisation called Orchestra Geelong. We're an inclusive community orchestra that accepts any and all musicians over the age of 17. We don't have auditions and we don't have instrument quotas. And this orchestra was established in September 2022. We had our first rehearsal. I was there. There was 10 people. And since then, we've just really gone from strength to strength. And a few months ago, we collaborated with a very similar community orchestra in Melbourne, and we had well over 80 musicians under the one roof, all playing music together. And it was the most invigorating experience. But, you know, I work in the leadership space and I need to practice what I preach. And so really that's my opportunity to do it through that organisation.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. And so, I mean, so much to sort of, so many questions just popped into my head, but, we'll get to our theme of community leadership. But I mean, how did you end up in this space then? If you think about what you're doing right now, and specifically, a lot of your time is around community leadership. How did you end up in this space?
Yeah, so the story to get here is a long one, but I'm just going to share kind of the last probably part of it. So it was about August 2023, and a colleague reached out to me and said, I need someone who can really own the Leaders for Geelong program, who has really strong facilitation, coaching, training, learning design skills, understanding how projects work, able to engage with a range of stakeholders and a lot more. And I remember exactly where I was at that point. I was at home and I was recovering from burnout related shingles in my facial nerve. It's really painful, very painful. It's probably the sickest I've ever been. I'd already had 3 months off work, and I knew that I couldn't go back to the life and the work that had got me to this point. During that time, my mum would drive me to Orchestra Geelong rehearsals on a Monday night because I couldn't drive. And I'd stay for the first half of that rehearsal, and then I'd go home and sleep for a couple of days because I had to recover from just that single outing.
Wow.
And honestly, the community held me at that time. And the community allowed me to show up and be myself and contribute what I could. It didn't ask any more of me than that. While I was playing music, I'd forget about the pain that I was in. And it really made me feel like I had a purpose. And I really loved the work that I do. And the committee at the time just allowed me to do what I could. And I remember being in bed writing a grant application. And lo and behold, this was our 7th grant application that we'd gone for, and the 6 previously we hadn't got. And this one that I wrote from my bed with shingles actually got us a grant, which I'm so proud of. But I mean, it just made me realize the power of community and why community leadership is so important. And so when my colleague reached out to me about this role, I thought, oh my gosh, this feels like a stars aligning moment. Hell yes. Yeah. So being in a values aligned space is really important for me.
Cool.
Just a question, Lauren. You mentioned community leadership and community values. What would be a definition of community? Because I'm sure there's lots of people think about community in different ways. How would you describe community?
Yeah, thanks. So I think about it in 3 different ways. So there's community as place. And so the suburb, the street you're in, the suburb you're in, the town you live in, the city you live in, the state you're in, the country. So community as place. I then think of community as an identity. So it could be your cultural identity, gender identity, at a stretch, your football team. And the last one being community solidarity, and that solidarity in some kind of shared belief or change that you want to see in the world. And there's plenty of examples of those. And often a sort of recent one that's come up in the last couple of years is when budget cuts happen and it has an impact on some kind of service in the community, and the community get behind it and say, we're not okay with this, and we want this service to continue because we know it's important to us. And I've got so many examples of these, but they're probably the three ways, Sue, that I describe community. Community as place, community as identity, and community as solidarity.
Okay. And then how do you then define leadership in the context of that definition of community?
Yeah. So sometimes it's easier to define a community leader by what they're not. And so, they're not generally paid. They're not confined to a specific organisation sometimes, and they're not necessarily confined to a specific remit. But they also don't have formal authority and positional power. So instead, they've got influence through their passion, their relationships, and then their ability to inspire, engage people's hearts and minds. So in short, their community leaders are passionate about something. They decide to act, and through that action, they're engaging other people's hearts and minds in that community. And then before you know it, people are around them and they're supporting them to do greater good, and then leadership becomes more collective. But it starts with someone wanting to do something different.
Okay, because leadership in the context of organizational leadership, what are the parallels between organizational leadership and, say, community leadership?
So perhaps if I just start with what community leadership can look like, and we'll compare it to what organizational leadership can look like. I always think about leadership as leading. It's an action. It's a choice that we can make. And so in an organization and in community, anyone can exercise leadership. It just so happens that in an organization, leadership is designed into roles. And so you might be a senior leader, you might be a team leader, you might be a leader with a particular technical expertise. And so leadership is an expectation, and it's designed into role. In the community, it's just an action. It's not necessarily an expectation. It can become an expectation, but that's kind of a key difference. And so if leadership is an action, it can look different in the community. It can also look different in organizations, but in the community, it can be little simple things. Like it could be, I've seen someone who needs help with something, and so I'm going to do something to help them. That can happen in an organization too. It could be sharing your point of view with the council might say, we're opening something for community consultation. What do you think? So in the community, it could be, actually, I'm going to have a point of view about what the council are putting to us, and I'm going to have my say. That can also happen in an organisation. A change can be talked about, and as someone within an organisation, you can have a view on that. You can share your support for it, or you can provide alternative perspectives that might mean the change goes in a different direction. But it also could mean identifying a need for something that has to happen in the community and creating something to meet that need. Examples being, I want to go for a run at 5:30 a.m. in the morning, but it's too dark and I'm not sure I want to run on my own. So I'm going to create a running group of like-minded runners who want to come along and run at 5:30 in the morning in a group because it feels safer. That can also happen in an organisation. I see that there's a need. I'm going to work out how to gather people around that need. That's also leadership in an organisation. I guess in the community, there's formal opportunities to lead, like on boards in not-for-profit organisations, just like there are opportunities in roles in organisations. So there's kind of parallels. You can sort of see that I see there's similarities. And in the leadership programs that I run, I'm very, very aware that everyone that comes into that program has got a responsibility to lead in their organisations. They often have leadership designed into their roles as an expectation. And they're also thinking about, well, how might I apply my skills in a different way in a community context? So I'm always kind of looking at the two of them. They're kind of sitting together, and we hold both of those things.
Cool. So maybe you've sort of taken us there. So I might sort of keep on going on that theme, if that's all right. But and it sounds like a dumb question, but what's the why for developing community orientated leaders, do you think? How is it helpful for communities? I think I know the answer to that. But also, how's it helpful for businesses that invest and send their leaders along to programs that the Committee for Geelong runs?
Yeah. Okay. So community leaders, for me, are often the ones that spot what's missing. and what needs to happen. And they hold these kind of invisible threads of connection. And they're quietly creating change from the ground up. They're often responding to the needs of a community before their systems do. And they often can build trust where the big institutions can't. And so with that, they're able to kind of turn individual concern into collective action. And so when we're investing in community leaders, we're really investing in the resilience and the health and the future of our communities. We're also saying that leadership doesn't have to come with the title. And it can come from like ultimate care, commitment, and sort of the courage to take a step forward. And so, the question is, well, why would an organisation invest in developing this in their people? I think there's a really strong business case for this. Community leadership is building exactly the kind of capabilities that our organisation needs. Organisations are becoming far more challenging in this context. They're far more uncertain. There's far more complexity. And so we need leaders that can build really strong relationships, who can listen really deeply, who can navigate complexity without necessarily relying on positional power and authority, that they can influence through trust and really engage the hearts and minds of the people around them. And you're able to work across boundaries. And I'm seeing this more and more. Organisations obviously have got a key remit. But what I'm seeing now is that they really need to collaborate with other organisations in a region to really create the kind of changes that are now needed. And so with that, you need to be able to work across organisational boundaries. And that's quite tricky at the moment, because often organisations are designed in service of whatever the thing is that they do. But I'm now starting to see the importance of designing organisations with capacity to be able to collaborate with other organisations in the region and making that actually a thing. It's not just the stakeholder relations, government relations person. It's actually a thing that's built into more than one role in an organisation, that expectation to collaborate across boundaries. And I think the other thing is that through the programs that we run, what we try to do is really get people to think about, well, what am I really passionate about, and what might it look like if I was to do something that was in a space that I was really passionate about. And I think that has only benefits for an organisation, because that all of these skills are kind of translatable into the organisational world. So that's kind of looking at it from what are the knowledge, skills, behaviours that leaders need. If I then look at it from the perspective of, I call it looking up and out, which is like the simple way to say, when you come into a community leadership program, you're meeting people from a range of other organisations in our region, and you're getting a sense of what's going on here in this place. And so you're looking up out of your organisation and out. And organisations are here in a community, and they need to know and understand what's going on here because it's impacting them. So that for me is also a key reason why you would invest in the development of community leaders, because they know what's the context this organisation is operating in. And the only other thing I'd say is that you become a better leader just by doing it. And often there's leadership opportunities in communities that you might not get in your organisation for whatever reason. And you can just go and do it. Like, there's many community organisations that are crying out for people to support them on their boards.
Absolutely.
Like, to be in a committee, I don't know, to do a sausage sizzle, but they're just opportunities to really practice and apply leadership. And so, if you can do that outside of your organisation and bring what you've learnt back in, that's only a benefit.
Cool. Question: is there a sort of a story or a moment that that really illustrates the sort of the kind of impact a community-orientated leader can have? Is there sort of one example that's top of mind to say, hey, this is the impact that community leadership can have?
Oh, there's so many examples that I could share. They all come from Orchestra Geelong, and because that's obviously where I see the impact that community can have just so profoundly. But Orchestra Geelong only happened because two people started it, So Scott Popovic and Alex Popovic decided to set up Orchestra Geelong. They had been travelling to Melbourne to attend School Orchestra, community orchestra, very similar type of model to us. And they said, I think we need something like this in Geelong. And they started the orchestra with a venue, with a conductor and with some Facebook ads. And they just started, right? So that was the thing. And then, we gathered around. And so all of a sudden now we're in, in a space where we've got well over 60 members, and its impact is growing. But there's a moment that really stands out for me. I think it was our second year, and one of our members writes music and composes music. And he had sort of some challenging experiences, and the way that he would express himself was through writing music. So he would write music and share that as a way to process what was happening for him. And he came to us and he said, I've written this piece of music. I just wanted to share it with you. And one of the violin players at the time listened to this piece of music, and quietly behind the scenes, she sent a message out to a few of us string players and said, what do you reckon? Do you think we should learn this piece of music? It's never been played before. Fields music hasn't been played before, and a few of us said, yes, okay, let's give it a go. So we spent quite a few hours in rehearsals, and we got this piece of music up to the point that we could play it. And we played it. And I think that what that moment showed was the way that one person started something, the rest gathered around, and then we performed this piece of music and showed this it's kind of like showing Phil what was possible, like, that you can actually you can do a lot of work to help people understand kind of their place. Community can gather around and support them and really help them realize their potential. And I think this story kind of went on over another couple of years because we played a number of other things, but it was just seeing the potential and going for it. Like, there was no barriers to stopping us, and we just went for it.
That's awesome. That's great. Great story.
One of the opportunities that I have is to chair an organisation called Life Education Australia. And if people don't know Life Ed, they generally know Healthy Harold. And our mission, if you like, is to empower children through education to make better life choices. I haven't quite said it exactly as it is, but that's my interpretation of what we do. So one of the things, and the reason I'm sort of thinking on that is at what age do you start to develop community leadership? And is there a moment? Is there an age? How do you start to grow community leaders?
That's funny, that question. So it's very well timed. So on Tuesday night, I have an 8-year-old, and he's been learning about trees and photosynthesis and all sorts of things about trees. Anyway, he came home on Tuesday night, and he'd set up a petition. At the top of the petition, it said "Save the Trees," and then he had managed to get a range of signatures from children who were at after-school care, and he did that with a friend. And then the next day, so this was Wednesday, he came home and he said, I've had posters up around the school, "Save the Trees," and I've been getting all these signatures. So he continued to get signatures. And then yesterday he came home and he's like, I've created a business card. And he had his name on the business card, "Save the Trees." And he's like, we're just working out where to from here. And actually, the funny thing was, on the business card, it had "leader" written underneath his name. and so I just thought, oh, that's hilarious. Like, this is something that they've realized there's a problem. They might not have the solutions, but they're getting people around a problem. And he's 8.
Wow.
I don't think it's too early to start, but I think it's when they start to get an awareness of the world around them, what the problems are, and then they start thinking, well, what can I do about it? And look, I don't think that I spend a lot of time talking about the work I do in our family, but I kind of thought when he came home with this example, my goodness me, like, this is what we talk about all the time. Maybe it's just osmosis. So no, I don't think there's I don't think it's 8. He's 8.
Yeah. And which trees sorry, Sue, I was curious, what trees is he hoping to save? Is there a specific tree, or what's his area, what's his focus?
So it's come from a statistic about the number of trees that get cut down in the world every year.
Right.
And then the realization that trees sustain life,
Yep.
and that if we cut down our trees, what's the impact on life? Yeah. So
No, good on him.
it's, I mean, in some ways I'm so proud of him. In other ways, I'm like, wow, this generation are holding a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. And so say that's in another situation, missed that boat, and the person is now considerably had a number of career and roles and what have you. Do you think it's a moment or an event that triggers this sort of desire to actually then take that step forward and say, yes, I'm going to do something different, I'm going to help somebody, or I'm going to change something?
I think it could be a moment, Sue, or it could just be some people just kind of naturally gravitate to this kind of work. I mean, you see it a lot where people have some type of life experience and then they recognize the system that they're in perhaps didn't support them in the way they needed it. And so therefore then decide to establish something that serves the purpose. Many of the community organisations in our region, I think, have grown from that little seed of an idea to providing a service that is really needed, and that wasn't a gap that wasn't getting filled by kind of institutions. So I think it can be both.
And just following on from that, do you think, because I think there's a lot of really good people doing really good things, but they're all quite narrow in their remit in some cases, and their brief, and therefore, they get wedged next to someone who's doing same but slightly different, next to someone who's doing same but slightly different. Is there an opportunity to consolidate some of all of this grassroots great community activation to turn it into that snowball that starts with as it goes down the hill? How do you create that huge snowball?
Yeah. Well, I've got two ways to answer this, Sue. So my 12 months ago, I would have said, yeah, let's consolidate. And, we look for efficiencies in how we're working and connect up like organisations. That's a no-brainer. I think sometimes that there's specific contexts in specific communities that mean these organisations have formed in a particular way to support that particular need. And so I think what's important is to look at what are the differences that make the biggest difference between those leaders and organisations that are doing similar types of work before you look at then what a consolidation might look like. Because yes, it might be more efficient, but then by the consolidating, it may not then meet the specific need of that community. Having said that, the Leaders for Geelong program is one of 9 regional leadership programs around Victoria that are focused on developing leadership capability in community. And Leaders for Geelong's been around for 20 years, so it's been work we've been doing for some time. And a couple of years ago, up until a couple of years ago, the state government was funding these 9 programs and overnight pulled the funding out of all 9 programs, and all 9 programs have really needed to work out how to stand up on their own 2 feet. It's probably been a fairly significant challenge for many of us to do that work. And we're now entering into a piece of work backed by some financial support by some local some trusts that is looking at how do we integrate the work of those 9 organisations plus a 10th, which is Leadership Victoria. How do we look at the way in which we collectively work to build statewide community leadership capability and capacity? And so, a collaboration like that, it allows us to tell our story of impact on a larger scale, but still then allows us to do place-based work. So I think it's getting the tension right between bringing something together because it's efficient and perhaps tells a more significant story of impact, but also then still allowing the place-based work to happen because that community needs something in particular. And an example of that is that Geelong, where we are, we're very close to Melbourne. We've got characteristics of a regional city. And some of the things that we do have and need are quite different to what's happening in some of the regional Victorian areas. And so, a leadership program that's up on the border of Victoria and New South Wales, where it's primarily farming and agriculture, their needs and what leadership looks like in that community is going to have some similarities to what it looks like here, but there's also going to be some key differences. And that's an example of where we're looking to collaborate to tell a statewide story of impact, but we can't possibly make it all the same.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. Thank you.
Cool. So have you got a question, or do you want to?
No, if you go.
No. Cool.
Yeah.
So maybe, and if we move on a little bit, then talk about, and we've sort of started shifting there in terms of the Committee for Geelong programs. And so I suppose my question would be, how do we help teams or, see community engagement as part of their role, not as a side project? Is one of the questions that I've got.
Yeah. So community engagement for me is the work of organisations, and it's not an extracurricular thing. I think it's part of being a responsible organisation and sort of being, just really being a connected and values-driven leader. And so the question is not why should we do it, but almost like why could we not? And so there's a few things that I think are important. It's important to connect any community engagement work to the purpose. What are you trying to do? And how do we connect that to the organisation's mission or its values? And why is having a community voice important in the work that we do? I've mentioned this already, but I honestly believe that organisations need to design this in and design in this cross organisational collaboration into more than one or two roles in their organisation. Because as I said, the connection between organisations in our region is the thing that's going to drive change, because everyone's got kind of a slice of the pie, and it's how do we look at the whole pie. There's a third thing where organisations can really recognise people who are volunteering their time, ask them about it, ask them what they're learning, and share that to really encourage others to do it. And really to show that it matters. When a community voice really shapes the way we do something as an organisation, show that it matters. It's not just collecting data and validating the assumption that you already had, or it's not like taking a product out to the community and saying, what do you think? You get a bit of feedback and ignoring it. It's actually using that, like truly asking, genuinely asking for input, and then showing how that engagement has made a difference.
Cool. And so if you think about sort of the work that you're doing, what are some of the myths about, community leadership or leadership development that, that are out there that potentially might cause you some frustration, because they are myths and they might be firmly held beliefs?
Yeah. I don't know if this is a myth so much, but I think it's an assumption. When you put someone through a leadership program, they'll pop out the other side as a better leader.
Well, that's generally a prophecy.
I just think it's a kind of a factory kind of mindset that you pop them in one side and kind of pop out looking sharp. The reality is that I'm not saying that they won't, but leadership is such a deeply personal thing. And leadership is so deeply connected to the context that people are in as well. And so there are many reasons that enable someone to lead successfully within an organisation. And there's sort of three questions that I focus on. And I think a leadership program will really help with one of the three questions. But the context that they're in also needs to help with the other two.
100%, yeah.
So I'll tell you the three questions, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. I have to reference here my beautiful colleague, Justine LaRoche from LaRoche Leadership, and I've worked together over a number of years. And so I wanted just to say that these three questions come from her. But the first one is do leaders know what to do? And do they know what the expectations are and what strengths or stories are they bringing into this? You know, where's their room for growth? So do they know what to do? The second one is are they able to do it?
Mhm.
And the third one is are they enabled to do it? Now, a
Mhm.
leadership program can help people figure out are they able to do it? So we can help people build the knowledge they need. They can
Yeah.
practice the skills. They
Yeah.
can test new ways of leading or different ways of leading. They can get feedback, and they can be supported to get really deep insights about how they show up as a leader. You can do that all through a leadership program. We can also give them access to networks. We can give them an understanding of what's happening in our region. We can do all of that. But it's only good if they do something about it. So there's a kind of an action that these leaders need to take following participating in a leadership program. So the big question is, are they enabled to act? And that people need to be supported. And if I'm testing a new skill or trying something different, the environment needs to support that. So it needs to be open to the fact that I might make a mistake or two. It needs to be open to supporting me, providing me with feedback. And so for me, a leadership program will do a lot,
Yeah.
but it's also up to then the system that you're in to support you to apply that learning. And it's up to you as an individual to be able to apply what you're doing. So yes, it makes a difference, but there's a lot more around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So if you think about maybe your 2 years of the the Leaders for Geelong Committee for Geelong program,
Yeah.
what's maybe one thing that you've learned? And I'm sure there's been a lot, right? But one thing that you've learned, either about yourself or about leadership when you think about the last couple of years.
I think the main one for me is that there's a few, but like leadership is deeply human and it's imperfect, right? It's messy. And even experienced leaders are really challenged, sometimes just by the basics. And so, often leadership does come back to the basics. It could be, well, how do I build relationships with someone who I actually really disagree with? Or, I need to challenge the status quo, but I feel deeply uncomfortable with sharing my voice around the issue. That's basic stuff, right? But it's deeply human and it's very imperfect. And just because I hold space for people to develop their leadership capability doesn't mean I'm always good at it or I'm always doing it. We're all human.
Yeah.
And I think it's just about practice, self-awareness, compassion, learning as you go, and just being really open to kind of going, well, I didn't quite get it right there, but we'll try again next time.
Yeah. Cool. Sue?
That's really valuable when you talk about that sort of leadership being personal and having that self-awareness to be open, because I think you're right. There is a perception that, even participants, I'm going to go on a leadership course, I'm going to come out the other end as a better leader. And you're right, they'll absolutely learn and grow through that course of that program. But you're right, it's everyday moments that make leaders, and it's being able to draw on those moments or those skill, that and owning it at when it doesn't go so good, and that's okay. And I think that's probably the most valuable thing that I've taken away from what you've been talking about today, and reinforce it that sometimes it's not always perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things to happen in a leadership program, it happens more in my work in organizations, is that I might be working with a group of leaders for a day. I might be running a workshop. So I've done a bit of work beforehand with them. We're coming in running a workshop. And I've, spent a long time agonizing over what are we going to do and how are we going to do it and how do I support this team to kind of shift. And then we go probably for the first 2 or 3 hours into the morning. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing really well. Like I'm right on plan. Like the timing's going well. We're doing exactly what I planned. And then often happens around lunchtime where someone might bring in a key leadership challenge that they're having, and I can rip up my session plan and go, great, let's now apply what we've learned to a real life scenario. And, that then kind of creates an opportunity to go, well, how does it actually work in practice? And we can test and experiment in a really playful way about how to do something different with the people who are there in the room. Obviously, you need a fairly open and psychological safe environment to do that. But that's my favorite kind of moment. I just love working deeply in a context with the people in the room and really supporting them to see different ways of doing things.
Cool. Lauren, we could keep on going, but I'm really conscious of time. So thank you so much for joining us. Certainly got me thinking about a lot of different things. So thank you. And I know that you sort of here you got three hats on, right? But if you wanted to, if there's opportunity, if people want to learn more about the leadership programs for Committee for Geelong or for the how do I say it?
Orchestra.
Thank you.
Orchestra.
Yeah. If they want to learn more about either of those two things, where do they go?
Okay, so the Committee for Geelong website
Mm-hmm.
has lots of information about Leaders for Geelong and the Activate Leadership program. So that's just www.committeeforgeelong.com.au.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're interested in Orchestra Geelong, we do have an Instagram page and a website. It's
Okay, cool.
awkward, as in this feels a bit weird, awkward, and then Stra, S-T-R-A, Orchestra Geelong. And certainly if you played an instrument at school and you've had a big break and you want to pick it up again, where your place. If you started learning an instrument during COVID, when you had a bit more time on your hands and you just want somewhere to come and play it in community where you place. We have good fun.
Great. So year 7 recorder, that was my sort of my start and end. So would I fit in? Have you got any recorders in the
No, we don't have any recording players, but I did see, I was at a concert the other night where there was a choir and a recorder player, and I was actually really impressed about how they integrated the recorder into that choir performance. And I thought, no, maybe there is a future for the recorder.
There you go. Good. I haven't given up hope yet. Besides thinking about your musical talent, Sue, what else has Lauren got you thinking about in terms of today?
Oh, I just think, as I said before, that thing that leadership is imperfect and it's personal and it's human and there's not a formula per se. There's obviously learnings that you take as you go. So yeah, to me that was my takeaway moment. Thank you.
Cool. Excellent. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. That was a really insightful discussion. So thank you so much for your time. For everyone that watches these, thank you very much for joining us again. We love doing On My Couch. If you want to learn more about OMC Group, it's omc-group.com.au. And Lauren, Sue, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you, Sue.
Cheers.